The Stinger is back, of course. Did you think I would miss this night?
March 26, 2001 should be a date that most wrestling fans recognise, as it was on this date in Panama City Beach, Florida, that the final ever episode of WCW Nitro would take place. The fans in attendance didn't really know what was going on, the commentators didn't even really know what was going on, and the wrestlers themselves behind the scenes didn't have a full grasp of what was happening. That their company was indeed about to go out of business. The very first WCW Nitro was held in September of 1995, but now we had come to March of 2001, and this was the end not only of WCW Nitro, but of the entire company. A company that had a rich history and legacy behind it. And all of that was about to go out the back door. Sting, of course, a wrestler who was a huge part of that rich history and legacy of WCW, would have the main event spot with another man who was a massive part of WCW and through the NWA days as well, Ric Flair. And those two would square off in the main event of Nitro that night, a show which was also known as the Night of Champions.
The last Nitro you wrestled Ric Flair, did you think that was going to be your last match?
I didn't know. I honestly didn't know. It was emotional for me because I knew that it very well could be the last match ever. And you know, when you think about how your wrestling career might end, you can never guess. You know, and who would have ever guessed that one? You know, live simulcast. You know, Cleveland and Panama City, and this is it. And then you got, you know, really what. It was almost like the enemy, you know. The enemy had come into our camp and held us prisoner.
Right. Is that what it was like backstage?
Well, yeah, it was.
Wow.
I mean, there's just no other way to put it. It just was. I mean, I'm not saying that they were, you know, abusive in any way. I mean, although I heard, you know, a couple things, a couple stories, but you know, with me, they treated me great. They were nice and polite. You know. Although Shane wanted me to do this interview and he didn't give it to me, somebody else gave it to me, and I ended up changing it. And I said, you know what, I'm sorry, but I'm going to do it the way I want to do it. And
was it something obscene, or was it just something you didn't want to do?
Oh no, it was nothing obscene. Nothing. It was just too generic, you know.
Right.
And I made it. It was still generic the way I did it, but it was still. I wanted it to send some kind of a message to, you know,
the audience.
Yeah, the hardcore WCW fans, and just, you know.
Right.
So as you heard Sting say there, the wrestlers backstage, everybody wasn't 100% sure exactly what was going on that night. Shane McMahon, of course, was at the final WCW Nitro, and he even appeared on the show, but he wasn't the only WWF employee there. The World Wrestling Federation reportedly sent several backstage officials to help with the final show and break the news to the WCW stars. This led many of the WWF officials to be worried for their safety as they were coming in from the opposing company. And there's just no telling what could have happened, right? So even though the WWF guys were worried for their safety, no attacks occurred, and many of the WCW stars said that it was a relief to see the WWF officials there, as it meant someone knew what they were doing. And that had become a rare sight in WCW for the past several months, if not longer, right? So there were just 7 matches on the card that night. The show started off with US Champ Booker T taking on the WCW World Champ Scott Steiner, with the winner taking both titles, and Booker T won that match. And he was bound for big things in his future. As the show was tagged the Night of Champions, we had the Cruiserweight Tag titles up for grabs, along with the Cruiserweight Championship and the World Tag Team Championships as well. And as I say, the final match that night, and the match that would be the very final match in WCW history, of course, Sting vs. Ric Flair, couldn't have been a more appropriate match for the final match. Of course, Flair giving Sting his big break back in Sting's early days, really helping to put the Stinger on the map. And on this night, it was Sting coming out victorious, submitting the Nature Boy in the Scorpion Deathlock, with the two shaking hands and embracing after the match.
The final night of Nitro, that last match with Ric Flair, when it was all over and said and done for, what were your emotions? What was going through your body, through your mind? What were you feeling at that last moment?
I hate to wear the surreal word out tonight, but it's the word I always use. It was like the enemy came in and stole all the women and children and took them all off, and we were all going to be killed. You know, it just felt like we were violated. It was like, is this really happening? I mean, we were number 2 for a long time, years, and we finally made it to number 1, and then we made it to number 1 globally. I mean, we were it, and to see it all being flushed, down the toilet I couldn't believe it. All those years that I was talking about being a second-class citizen, and now I get to be a first-class citizen, and WCW's number 1 and Monday Nitro, and we were breaking attendance records all over the country, and pay-per-view buy rates were being broken left and right. Video game sales like never before. I couldn't believe it was happening. And then, for me, I just kind of disappeared with my tail between my legs after all those years, and it just sucked, to be honest with you.
The show that had rivaled the one and only wrestling company in the world at the time, the World Wrestling Federation. The WCW not only rivaled them, but they bettered them. They defeated them for that record 83 weeks, as we all know now. The WCW were crushing the WWF in the ratings. They had everything going for them. The NWO was an absolute phenomenon, bringing back those legends and big stars from the WWF, the Hogans, the Savages, Hall, Nash, and more. They really made it work for them. They were so hot through 96, 97, and 98. It was the place to be on a Monday night watching Nitro. But then they just lost their way. Too many cooks in the kitchen, the inmates running the asylum, just some of the phrases we have heard about what happened in WCW at the end. There really wasn't one true leader, one true boss who could take the reins and take control of that company. Real shame. As I say, so much history in the company from the NWA days and then turning into WCW. The company did struggle for many years to get on top, but when they did, boy, did they make a huge impact on the wrestling scene. And we did get TNA starting up after WCW disbanded, but it just wasn't the same. Would have much rather wanted that original WCW company to stay afloat with those original wrestlers, the Stings, the Lugers, the Steiners, the Harlem Heats, the DDPs, the list goes on and on, all the many great cruiserweights they had. WCW was a really awesome and entertaining show when it was around. The company had a lot more to give. I would have given them another 10 solid years easy. If not longer, there was a lot more meat left on that bone of WCW. No, they wouldn't have been able to rival the WWF in the ratings war. That ship had already sailed. But with Bischoff getting back into it at the time when the company did close, I'm sure they would have been able to find their feet again and put out a really good product. And Bischoff did try right at the very end to get WCW back up on its feet, and it looked like the company was going to be able to go ahead, but at the last minute, TV rights were cut, TV deals were thrown out the back door, and Bischoff knew that it just wasn't going to work. The rug was so-called pulled from under him, and the whole thing just fell apart at the very end there, which is unfortunate. I'm sure a lot of guys like DDP and Booker T would have gone to the WWF anyway, but I am sure guys like Sting, Luger, Savage, Hogan, the Steiners, and all those young and up-and-coming cruiserweights would have stuck around in WCW, and it still would have been a really good product. But want to know what you guys think about it in the comments down below. How did you feel when WCW had to close its doors for the final time? Some of you may not even have been born when WCW was on, but let me tell you, it was a great product when it was going, especially in those mid to late 90s. So thanks heaps for tuning into the vid, guys. Be sure to give us a big thumbs up and sub to the channel if you haven't already. Also consider becoming a channel member. There's more information on that in the link down below, and we'll catch you next time here on Stinger Wild. Thanks heaps, guys, for tuning into the video. be sure to drop a scorpion death drop on that like button and subscribe to the channel for more awesome pro wrestling action from the WWE, the WCW, and much more.